Yes, here we go. It's the Monday Club. There's a lot of doom and gloom out there, and to be honest, my patience is being tested now as well. As you can see, Jonathan, I'm getting a wee bit professional in here. You see that in the background? You like that, son?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a bit of banter, really. Let's be honest. No one takes himself too seriously on the bus. We always will try and have a bit of a laugh whilst we can, whilst it gets a wee bit more testing times, though. The laughs may turn into a bit of disagreement, but I'm all for it. As long as everyone gives respect and gives their views in the live chat, we will be okay. And I know the live chat will be busy tonight. We exited the League Cup last night. Before we get into all of that, and Jonathan opens us up, we'll do all that good stuff. Remember to like, share, slag my hair. I've been getting my hair slagged by the girlfriend today, Johnson. She's sitting there watching right now. I tell you what, this is
oh.
a wee bit nervy. But then, obviously, if you want to become a Boise Bus member, do the 199. Who cares? Patrick McLaughlin, there's Phil McGinley, Jim C, Joe Brown. All the content's always free. Danish is in. Thank you as well. But it's obviously it's not important. It's just something that it keeps the channel running. We do appreciate your support, but the content will always be free. If you want to go to pricesports.com and you want to get a wee tasty discount, 12.5% off, then crack on as well. Okay, out the League Cup, Jonathan Boyce, your thoughts?
Well, Russell, in a week where pothole breakdowns in July have been their highest since 2018, it turned out Celtic hit a rather large one of their own on Sunday, and it is quite clear some replacement parts are now needed for the vehicle. At the moment, Celtic are heading towards a crossroads and they are stuck at the traffic lights. On one side of the road, you can take the direction to Complacency Crescent, which can lead us right down the path and road of reminiscence when it comes to Brendan Rodgers, in the hopes that he can turn this around and salvation can be achieved at Celtic, going back over old ground. That would perhaps be quite a bumpy road to take. The other option would be to take the road to our right, which would be Ambition Avenue, and that leads to the road of redemption after going out of the League Cup. That is where Celtic go out and get Brendan's men in that he needs to solve this conundrum he is now facing. The crossroads are all there. We're 2 weeks away from the window closing now. Buckle up, Russell. It's going to be a bumpy ride.
Well, yes, it is indeed, mate. Very good work again. I like that. All the roads, traffic lights. It's very clever, Jonathan. Well put together, mate. The jokes are over, I suppose, though. Really now, I think that's as far as the banter can go, because when you exit a League Cup, it's no funny. Unfortunately, I appreciate. Obviously, I left those openings; they're amazing. Never change them. But now it's now a case of, whilst I try and keep peddling a line of, we'll get the signings in then. Many people have countered my argument throughout and said, the season has begun already, though, boys. And none more so was that realised when we exited the League Cup. One thing I will say as well, and it was Phil who got in touch with me today, and he says, do you remember what you used to say about a year ago? And he's right. So I better be consistent as well. Fans get more outraged when we exit a competition like a League Cup than they do when we lose in Europe. Now, the Champions League, for example, when that comes around, if we're losing in the League Cup, we will naturally lose in that as well. We need to start looking like we mean business at some point in this window. I presumed it would be the last couple of weeks. But what yesterday does is it sharpens your focus. It gets you now, Jonathan, everyone from the naysayers that and are skeptics, if you like, that have always been worried that this window was heading the way that it normally does, and then you get the yays like me who have a blind belief at times, a blind faith in Brendan, and that's now being tested. What it does do though is it sharpens all our focuses. 100% now of the support are watching the next 10 days. Whether they were always in the camp, we'll get the business done later in the window. Or whether they're in the camp, we won't do fuck all. Everyone's now in unison that the next 10 days, all over to you guys. All over to the board. Jerry Coyle says, have we not signed a load of players? We've signed 5, Jerry. You're absolutely right, pal. We have signed players. Signed 5 players. If you think they're going to take us to the next level instantly, fair enough. Hopefully they do. I've liked what I've seen it in spells of Yang in terms of home at times. Rocky again, I didn't think he was the worst guy yesterday in the team. But what I would say is we now want to get stronger players to add to our first 11. We want to see now the Brendan Rodgers signings. I've said we'd only arrive later in the window, but now all of us, Jonathan, all of us are now sharp and laser focused on what Celtic and this board do between now and the 31st August. It's very much now, pal, over to them.
Definitely. As I say, when I talk about the crossroads, it's quite clear we're at them. When it comes to the board, you're looking at it and you've got to realise that, you know, some Celtic fans will feel vindicated with how things have went, you know, in terms of the board, perhaps not backing Brendan as much as we would have liked up until this point. And it's ended up meaning we've fallen on our arse on the first step of defending the League Cup, which could have been avoided, you know, if we'd got the players in earlier in the window. On the flip side, you know, you look at it and think there's 10 days left. And if, you know, it does turn out to be a case where Brendan Rodgers gets the players in that perhaps were otherwise unavailable earlier in the window, we might well end up being able to brush off the Kilmarnock game in some ways, particularly if we were to follow it up by winning, you know, at Ibrox. I would suspect that the Cup game will almost be forgotten about, but there's absolutely no two ways about it. What we witnessed on Sunday was completely unacceptable from a Celtic team. The performance was nowhere near the levels that we would expect. Now, you know, I know we've had a lot of success with trebles in the last, you know, 5, 6, well, really the last 10 years almost. Now we're going back. But they are a rarity. You have to accept off days are going to happen. Unfortunately, they haven't happened very often to us in the Cups. This was a rude awakening. That obviously the fact that the summer window perhaps hasn't been quite as strong as we would like up until now. There's also other factors in play with the fact, you know, you've got Carter Vickers out injured, so you don't have who would make a massive difference in that type of game. Also, Johnstone, for example, if he's fit, I don't think he's sleeping at the back post for the Kilmarnock goal. I think Ralston was pretty poor. Again, if I'm honest, I don't think he's quite found his magic touch that he had perhaps under Anja in his first season. And, you know, obviously not having a tie in the middle of the park, again, weakens your hand a little bit. And that's 3 players that can make it quite a big difference to the team when they're all back fit, you know, and firing. But make no mistake about it, the board have got to look at that and realise that performance is just nowhere near good enough. You can almost accept in some ways losing a game like that if, you know, the team plays well. And it's one of those days where the keeper has, you know, an outstanding performance and, you know, perhaps the referee's just not giving you anything and you end up getting suckered. That was not the case yesterday, unfortunately. Yesterday was a case that Celtic turned up there, did very little other than pass the ball around on this bobbly surface, didn't really seem to have any spark or imagination for the vast majority of the game. I felt Yang was one of the few exceptions to the rule when he came off the bench, but it actually, Russell, felt to me a lot like watching Brendan Rodgers Celtic when they went to Kilmarnock when Steve Clarke was the manager. It had eerie similarities to me with that. And I don't know what you think, if you think perhaps there is something there that perhaps Brendan also needs to take away, as well as the board, that perhaps he might need to also think about his tactics for these sort of fixtures going forward, because it was something I think he did have a little bit of a weakness for his first time around. Not that he had many, but the plastic pitches were ones that he tended to go unstuck on more than most.
I think that's fair. I think yesterday we've seen a negativity in the style of football that would be disappointing, regardless of what players are brought in or not brought in as of yet. And I think we need to be open and honest about that. And we'll talk about that as well. I think firstly we will look at the transfer window side of things. I'm going to focus on that now, and then we'll talk about the style of football too, because I think it's important. I can't be completely, whilst I say my faith in Brendan is blind, I can't be blind when I'm on the pod and not looking at all angles of this, and it would be remiss of me to do so. Let's look at the team right now in terms of the improvement that's been made so far with the signings that have came in against the signings that have gone. I think most of us would sit there and say this squad on paper is not as strong as the squad we had. Okay? It's not as strong. There's no two ways about it. So, with that in mind, that's not preparing for the season properly that begins now. However, my thing was, I felt that the signings might be made later in the window with a view to the Champions League and a belief in by Brendan that he would navigate the first sort of few games without getting those in and hedge his bets and back himself. Kilmarnock away, they've now beaten both Celtic and Rangers. Of course, there's going to be freaking out now that means when we go to Ibrox, somehow that equates to we get leathered. I don't quite subscribe to that either. I think we'll see. I appreciate the fact the squad's not as good now, but I believe that still between now and the end of the window it will strengthen. I wonder if this defeat not just sharpens the focus of the blind faithers like me, the happy clappers that are out there that would back anything, and of course the skeptics that were always going to be asking questions, which is fair enough. But I now wonder if we'll get to the stage where now it's the board that even themselves go, holy shit, maybe we haven't done quite enough yet. This isn't quite looking like it's going to be able to compete, let alone in fucking domestically, but in Europe, not that we can't compete domestically. I don't mean that as a dramatic thing. I just mean we're maybe not as far ahead as we were even domestically, this season as we were last season, let alone making impacts in Europe, which we need to be honest, was what Brendan said in his first presser, and you would guess was a quote that was discussed before getting made public, as in, let that be the narrative at this presser. Of course they have these conversations before they go live. Of course they do. They're not always unorganised as us on the bus.
Yeah, well, definitely. I think the board are certainly going to come under a bit of pressure after this. The next few days are going to be really important for them, because I wouldn't be necessarily surprised if the fans vent their anger towards the board in some sections come the weekend at St Johnstone. There might well be question marks being asked about what's happened in this window if they don't end up getting it right. Absolutely, it will be come the end of the window if it doesn't happen, sooner. So they have to be looking at that. And yeah, I think perhaps they had thought they could be able to get away with, the start of the season with the players they had, because, there's 2 home games there. Granted, there's a tricky trip to Bustalgia, which we actually navigated fairly well the week before. They've probably I feel pretty hard done by with how the draws went in some ways, because Kilmarnock was probably the hardest team we could have actually drawn, because it's seeded and unseeded in that round of the League Cup as well. Not everyone gets home ties to Greenock Morton. Sometimes you do get hit with the trickier venues to go to, and Kilmarnock away was absolutely, I think, the hardest tie Celtic could have got. However, when you look at it, the team's just not equipped, and I think Mark was talking about it on post-match pitch, yesterday. When you look at the bench, there wasn't really anything on it. You could turn around and say that's, a game-changing impact substitution that we've got, and it's quite a bit removed from Ange's time, where he would quite often have the likes of a Giacomakis on his bench, a Maeda or an Abada, somebody who could come on and potentially change the game. It kind of felt like Brendan Rodgers, if the game wasn't going his way, he didn't have an awful lot there to tinker with to try and change it. And I think in some ways that was probably why you've seen so many like-for-like substitutions with Rodgers, is because he couldn't come up with an alternative way of trying to play, because he is known for, tinkering his teams to try and, something different when, things weren't going well for Celtic in his first time.
Brilliant.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, I think he was finding that, when he's looking at his bench there, he's thinking, I'm struggling here to find, a player I can bring on that's really going to be able to influence this game and, change it the way that I want to change it. And that is a feeling on the club up until this point, that we've ended up in a situation where we've played our first, League Cup tie of the season, and we've been ill prepared. Granted, as I say, there was a few injuries, etc. But that notwithstanding, I think Celtic went into it thinking they could get away with these first few games, and it came back and bit us on the arse. And it's a lesson that Celtic should really know better than, really, when you consider it all, because it wasn't that long ago we were having to try and negotiate, Champions League qualifiers at this time of the season, and we did the exact same thing, where we would wait till towards the end of the window before strengthening our team to have a go in the qualifiers, and then more often than not, we'd end up getting knocked out. Well, this time it's actually happened, in a domestic trophy. Now, as I say, granted, it's the League Cup, and, there's always a possibility that, if we're able to recover, over the next few weeks, I think people will be able to get over going out of the League Cup. But at the moment, it's definitely one that hurts. The fact that the treble has been lost and defended so poorly by going out in the first real hurdle in it, again, it's going to ask question marks to the board. And you're right, it's going to put pressure on them, Russell. I just wonder, from your point of view, would you expect there to be any sort of knee-jerk reactions from the sort of supporters come at Celtic Park, this weekend, if there isn't, reinforcements in the building by then? Or will the fans have enough patience to wait to see how this window plays out?
I don't know. I mean, 1888 CFC is saying we all sound like Huns, one loss and it's all over. I don't know what you're talking about, pal, by the way, just when you're putting that in. Just don't talk shite, because that's not what no one's saying that. No one's saying, we're saying there's a sharper focus now in the next 10 days of the window. So don't come in with crap like that. I don't think that's fair. And I appreciate the fact you've been on the bus loads, by the way, I really do, but that's not where we're at. We don't want to be falling out with silly lines that I think this is what happens. Unfortunately for Brendan, I've been on the positive side, but it did initially split. I think it was about 80-20. I think 80% were in favour of him coming back, and there's maybe a smaller percentage that still didn't want him to come back. And then when problems arise, like leaving exiting a League Cup in the first round you play in, I think that then brings up now comments like David Killie saying he's not even a good manager. I mean, I find that hard to believe as well, but okay. I think that's what's just going to happen. Do you know what I mean? Now, I think that's where it's going to go. The split becomes more magnified. Now we've got the interesting complex of comparisons with Neil Lennon coming back. I think there are gulfs apart in managerial ability, Johnstone, right? Let's get that abundantly clear. However, if he comes back as Rodgers light, he may as well pack up his bags now, because there is no point in being Rodgers light. He is going to need to find his bollocks, Jonathan, and get back to being the guy that people don't like, the narcissist. Get back to throw the boat under the bus. I don't give a monkeys. Start chapping their door every 2 weeks if you're not happy. If he thinks he's now saying in an interview yesterday, we need quality, that's definite, that's apparent. We've always needed quality, Brendan. I'm hoping you were going to bring in the next level of quality later in the window, because that'll be the easiest time to get them. You better be bloody right. You better be right that you've hedged your bets on that. And I think you're right. If he does, maybe the League Cup exit will become, who cares in the grand scheme of things. As long as we win the league and we actually make a dent in Europe, and I don't mean in terms of progression in the competition, but at least we have a go. And we look like we can win points in it. I really do believe that now, when we look at Rodgers' persona when he's came back, I think there'll be a lot of us now looking into the ins and outs of Rodgers, how he's been, his demeanour. Has he still got that same purpose? Has that same mindset? Has he still got that defiance? Has he still got the balls? Is he back because he's grateful to be back? If he is, he's doomed.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at it and you're hoping that he's not let complacency slip in his mind as well, because you've got to remember he was unbelievably successful in his first stint here, and there's always going to be concerns, I think, from my point of view, that you could potentially end up looking at that and thinking, that Celtic are going to be, all conquering again this time around, and that was a bit of a cakewalk the first time. But I think, his
Exactly.
demeanour, yeah, I think his demeanour and a few other things they just weren't quite what I would have expected from him. I thought he might have tried something a bit different. I felt he was kind of more just standing with his arms folded for a lot of the game without really trying to influence it in the same way that we know he can. Now, granted, I know the squad's nowhere near as strong as we'd like it to be quite yet, but that doesn't mean that we couldn't have tried one or two other things to have tried to have got back into it. So it's something that Rodgers needs to look at and find answers to within himself as well. And I think he might have to look at adopting a different style of play a lot of the time, because I think Kilmarnock had their game plan. We knew what their game plan was going to be before it started. Rodgers knew what their game plan was going to be before it started, because he's seen how they've set up countless times in his first spell against us. But it didn't look like we had any answer to it. And, part of that perhaps is down to the players that he had available. But I think part of it was also down to the fact that we just were not quick enough with the ball at our feet. And we made it quite easy for Kilmarnock to get back into their shape, get the men behind the ball, and ask us the question, can we break them down? And, when we were trying to break them down, we just didn't seem to have any answers. I thought particularly, I thought Maeda, for example, had one of his worst games in a Celtic top. I just couldn't see any way he was going to get past his man at any point that the ball came to him. It just felt like it was just either going to go backwards or just going to run into a hole and lose it. He just doesn't have that creative spark that we need to try and unlock defences when they set in like that. And it certainly isn't going to help his pace with the way the team is playing either, because if it's going to be that sort of slow build-up, the Maeda's not going to get a chance really to run in behind, because Scottish teams aren't necessarily all going to push out on us. In fact, most of them won't. So we need to be able to counteract that. So there was a lot to take in. I think there's a lot of frustration because it's happened, in the Cup. I think the frustration might have been tempered slightly if this had been a league game. Bear in mind, Rangers had already dropped points as well, and you'd have still had the opportunity of winning 3 trophies, but it becomes magnified even more because we've gone out of one of the Cups. And it goes back to what I've said, Russell. The bottom line is, Celtic fans, we've just been so spoiled with success over the last, years, since 2016, 17, of winning trebles. It's almost became the norm for us. And for those of us that are a bit longer in the tooth, we know that's not always the case. In fact, they're very difficult to win. They're very difficult to win, but because of the fact we've just got so used to winning them recently, which is nobody's fault, it's just been the fact Celtic have been that great over the last 7-8 years, that we're almost now at a point where if we don't win a treble, it's a catastrophe. Whereas that shouldn't be the mindset, if you ask me. It should always be about winning the league. Granted, you want to put in performances, domestic cups, but I think if we were to end up getting some players in over the next week or so, make a bit of a dent in Europe, and still retain the league title.
Where'd you sit with that, Jonathan? You're saying if we get players in, do you actually think they will, or do you think they won't? Where are you on that? Because we've been pretty confident up to now that they will do business, and we predicted. Oh well, I certainly did. I'll not tar you with the same brush, but like I always say, I felt it would be the last couple of weeks of August. That's when the business will get done. Now you're saying if. Is that putting you, because of a bad defeat, in a place where you think maybe there will be less business done? Is it Rodgers' demeanour now? What's going on that's maybe, because I can't deny it, even myself, I hate not being completely knee-jerk, thinking everything falls apart because of one week cup exit. I think there's a wee bit of me that still even though now goes, shit, maybe I've been overconfident that, things will be happening in the background, you know what I mean, that won't. But really a result shouldn't affect what the transfer strategy is. But you said if there. So I want to challenge you on the if we get players in. How confident are you that we will do so?
I think we will get the players in. I just don't know whether or not they're going to be at the levels that I would expect them to be at. I think that's where the concern possibly is. I think there was, naturally going to be a lot of high expectation going into this window when, Rodgers comes in so early. And there was always that sort of big expectation that if Rodgers is coming back, he's going to be getting, financially back quite heavily, and he's going to be able to make a big dent in the squad with some transfer business, which is yet to really materialise, if we're being brutally honest about what's happened so far in this window. Obviously the result, at the weekend there, and the fact we went into that, and perhaps we were, myself was perhaps a little bit negligent to just how poor the squad is in terms of the depth of the squad, perhaps. And perhaps, it does take an eye-opening result like that against Kilmarnock at the weekend to make you realise that, we've got a few players in there that are really they're not good enough to be playing. Even domestically for Celtic, never mind if you're wanting to make inroads into Europe. And I think that should hopefully set alarm bells ringing. But if you're asking me on the if part of it, I still think Celtic will do the business. My concern is whether or not Celtic will do the business that they need to do. I think because the fact we're getting even closer now, perhaps I'm getting a bit more jittery with the fact we're only 10 days away, and we're now beginning to think it's getting a bit closer. If we can't identify and get these players that, Rodgers has perhaps already identified, because I was with you that he would look for some at the end of the window, then we might be forced back into looking for, project players that may or may not improve the team. And we're almost, back into that sort of, hoping we get a raffle prize out of buying a few tickets and hoping one turns up trumps. But if you're asking me, we shouldn't be getting it too much of a knee jerk. But I think naturally, as supporters, we tend to. But I still think he'll try for Tierney. I still think that's one he'll try for. But if you're asking me overall, because the window's getting closer to being over, I do have a little bit more doubt in my mind. And I guess the fact that the team has been left to get ravaged as badly as it was, that we just didn't have any real quality on the bench in the League Cup at the weekend there, makes me a bit more concerned that perhaps we should have done a bit more business earlier on, which, in fairness, I never really picked up on until now.
We're in a perfect storm here as well, just to be real. I mean, okay, forget the fact that, not forgetting, I should say, the fact we are 3 points clear. We've got to take that into consideration. Already 3 points clear. But out of the League Cup, we've got a guy called Peter Lowell back at the football club, which causes alarm bells. I cannot be bothered with people who say, look, he's a non-executive chairman, he's retired, he's not got any influence. Just shut up. He's the chairman, right? Celtic call him the chairman now. The chairman has an influence at that football club. He's been there for 27 years. There is no way his character traits change that much that suddenly Peter Lowell's not going to be going, what's going on there? What's going on there? Oh, what's that? What's that? And give his opinion on it as well. Of course he does. So get that out of your head. Am I blaming it all on that? No. This is let me get there with the perfect storm. There's also a debate going on there that Brendan Rodgers isn't a good manager. I mean, I find it fanciful to say the least 2 fifth finish places in the EPL and you can be regarded as not a good manager. He did that with Leicester City, for fuck's sake. I'm winning an FA Cup. Not a good manager because of his style. We'll talk about that as well. But I think people will be quicker now, Jonathan, to question him as well when it comes to the style. I think because he's been here before, he won't get the waiting time that Ange got. He will not get it. He will not get that. So you've got a Lawwell getting, you've got a Rodgers doubting, and then you've got, of course, the transfer window itself. I think when you combine all this, then if performances on the park compound it all, such as exits from the League Cup, then you're into this perfect storm where we're going to end up ramping a hell of a lot of pressure as well on everything, and probably make it harder for the team. Yeah. David Killie says a title-winning Leicester side. David, oh come on,
you're better than that, David.
David, I love your points, but that wasn't the title-winning Leicester side that you got relegated. That's just been a wee bit creative with what you're saying. I think this is the downside of Brendan coming back. Brendan was the best manager to get, in my opinion, by a mile. There's just too many other narratives that are going on now that are going to confuse and as I say, disillusion fans, confuse fans, anger fans. I think everything now, the magnifying glass that is now on Celtic and their performances is, I always say it's to a higher standard, which I agree with, but now it's a case of it's every single pass is just wildly going to be looked at. And I didn't think there was too many back passes, by the way. But every little mitigating factor that leads to anything negative is now going to be turned on with a torch onto the board. Lawwell's back. Onto the manager. He's a rat. He's lost his way. He's not as good anymore. Onto the team. The transfer window was crap, etc. Even though we've spent more money this window than we did the last one. It's a perfect storm, Jonathan. We do have 10 days, though, to get everyone back on board. That's the interesting thing.
Well, yeah, I think that is where it all boils down to, because this can go one of two ways. I would fancy us, regardless of what happens in the transfer window, to take care of St Johnstone, because they look out of sorts at the weekend. Particularly at Celtic Park, that game should really take care of itself, regardless of what the position is with the squad for that one. But then, you do have the end of the transfer window, and then it's straight to Ibrox, and that is going to be a huge game in the narrative of this season, and it's shaping up to be a bit of a dynamite fixture in a lot of ways that could make or break the two clubs, because if things go the way we expect and Celtic and Rangers both win this weekend, then we go to Ibrox, and if there is a lot of naysayers and the transfer window doesn't go the way we want, Rangers do turn us over like they did at Ibrox at the end of last season, and do it convincingly like they did the last time we played them, then the alarm bells are going to be ringing really loud at Celtic Park, and the fans are going to be voicing their discontent. There's no two ways about it. If you ask me, if those combination of factors play out. On the flip side, if Celtic do get their business done, and the master plan was always to wait to the end of the window, and they do get the big names in when it matters, they end up going to Ibrox and managing to win, and Brendan convinces them with another one of his tactical masterclasses at Ibrox, which he has shown he is capable of countless times in the past. Celtic then go into a position where they're 6 points clear, and all of the pressure then goes on to, Mickey Beale and Govan, and Brendan Rodgers has that bit more of a cushion with the fans going into the Champions League games. And you can already see how this could go going into even Europe. This is a domino effect. These next couple of weeks are going to be absolutely crucial, I think, in how this season is going to play out already, and it's so early on, because I would fully expect that if things go south, the European campaign could be an absolute disaster as well if we're looking at option one. If it's option two and we're building off the back of winning at Ibrox, having done the business at the end of the transfer window, then, if that Champions League draw is favourable, we might be able to carry some momentum into there, and actually put in some good performances and hopefully get the results this time to boot. But for me, I've never seen a more interesting and perhaps, such an important end to a transfer window in quite some time at Celtic Park, because I just think that the number of variables we're talking about here, if Celtic don't get the business done, you could end up in a position where everything ends up disjointed between the supporters and the football club, which we've seen how that can play out in the past. It can end in total disaster. Or alternatively, we redeem the situation. We end up getting ourselves into a position where we get those players in, we get ourselves a cushion in the league early on, and then we're able to look forward to the European games, and people will already be kind of almost forgetting about the Kilmarnock game in some ways. But I have to say, Russell, I don't know about you, but I think these next 10 days might be the most important transfer window business Celtic have conducted in, a good 4, 5, 6 years. Probably since the COVID season before the 10 in a row.
Well, this is it. I mean, Gary comes in and he's saying as well, Brendan didn't bring in his own background team. He's one of the managers who's taking his own guys everywhere until now. There was speculation, I think last week, Brendan could be forged a new relationship with the board that could see him, I don't know, being in cahoots with him. I think it's a bit of a stretch. But what I would say is, undeniably, it feels like Brendan is accepting things. When you look in the face of it, that's not good that he's brought in his own background team. It's not good that he's saying, "Oh, I just take players that are offered to me." I felt it was all PR when he was saying this shit, because behind the scenes he's still the same Brendan Rodgers that we thought. I think I agree. We need to go in. These next 10 days are now bigger than ever. They're bigger than ever. He has to start finding his bollocks again. This is that simple. Let's talk about his style of play, though, because that's now getting considered. That's now getting considered as in it's poor and it's boring and it's back to 2018-19, where it's not really his fault when you get Yusuf Malumbu instead of John McGinn, for example. The style was going to be hampered. I just wonder if the style of football right now compared to Angie's, because it's not that same rock and roll sort of flow to it, it's not got that same intensity, that same energy, that it's almost getting judged a wee bit harsher as well. I think there is an element of truth in that. Um, how do we get everyone back to the space they were on the 80-20 split, I would say? How do we get it back to 80-20, Jonathan, between now and the end of the window? I've got a feeling, and I think I said this the other week, last week, I've got a feeling now we could be linked with fucking anyone, and we're going to find a negative in it. That's where I think it is. I think that's where this is going now, this window. I think no matter what happens between now and the first, I don't think you get that unison and that holy trinity that was spoken of before.
It's hard to really see many. I mean, Kieran Tierney might be the obvious one that perhaps could unite the fan base if we were able to pull that off, because he is still universally liked by all of the supporters. I think it'd be very hard pressed for many to be concerned about that, particularly after Greg Taylor's performances of late. But there is no two ways about it. The window is shaped up with such high expectations that there is likely to be a fall come the end of it. For a lot of fans, regardless of whatever business we end up doing. I think the exception to that rule would be somebody like a Kieran Tierney or somebody of that sort of ilk. But Tierney seems the most obvious one out of all of them if we were going to do something like that. You do have to hope, I think, when Brendan gets the players in, I think he might start tweaking things. I think he might start looking at doing things slightly differently, because I think, particularly, guys like McInnes are already, acutely aware, Russell, of how Brendan Rodgers sets his teams up from his first spell, because McInnes was in charge of the second best team in Scotland, if you remember back then. It was actually Aberdeen that were the second best team in Scotland back then. He was able to obviously, watch Rodgers' teams at close quarters and had plenty of games, against them to try and work out formulas to try and come up with ways to win. And, I think that there is obviously, pays dividends in some ways, and if you continue going to the same well of trying to just play the sort of possession-based football and pass it around, managers will eventually adapt their styles to find ways. You've always got to be evolving your styles, and it goes back to you talk about the last season of Brendan Rodgers. I always think of the first season of Lenny after he comes back in after that, where his style of football was getting found out slightly, and he changed it and went to the 3-5-2 in the second half of that season, and that was what gave us the cushion to call the league for 9 in a row. And I just think Rodgers might need to adapt his tactics slightly, which he's more than capable of doing, by the way. I don't think he's somebody that's a one-trick pony. Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's a one-trick pony at all. I think there's plenty of other ways that Brendan Rodgers knows how to skin a cat, as I know you like to put the expression out there sometimes. So I think he'll definitely be looking that once he gets his players in over the next 10 days, whether it's all the ones he wants or whether it ends up being a couple the club have ended up identifying for him, I think he's going to need to have a wee think about how he's going to best set this team up, because he might have to tweak it slightly depending on the players he has at the end of the window, as well. And I think he's also going to have to take into consideration Rangers under Mickey Beale. Mickey Beale was, in the building at Ibrox when Rodgers was last here as Celtic manager, and has a good understanding of how Rodgers set up that time around as well. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if Brendan has something in his back pocket to try and change things. I would like to think anyway going forward, and the reason he hasn't implemented that strategy yet is because he's got a lot of players, a lot of dead wood, if you like, that played, even at the weekend there, that won't feature if he has his way over the next 10 days. And that is where it is so important that he is back and he is getting the players in that he wants, so he's able to make a proper crack at this. Because, if he doesn't and he's stuck in a situation where he's having to deal with players that I'm not convinced he thinks are good enough either, then you do wonder, would you then get a bit of a Rodgers like where he feels like his hands are tied almost slightly, and he's struggling to find a way to get the best out of what he has because he doesn't believe the players that he has are strong enough. And it just sets it up so unbelievably for the next 10 days that we're in this sort of position. I think that, we've had a few warning signs, with the performances. Ross County have taken a couple off us. Aberdeen have taken one off us. Kilmarnock obviously played pretty well there at the weekend. So there's a lot to look at here.
Have we followed on from last season as well? Whilst Brendan's going to take all the flack, at the end of the day, this guy's the rat to a lot of people, or was the rat, and maybe in the back of your mind he still is a rat or whatever. So he's going to get the flack. But are we just watching a follow-on from the last 6 games last season? Is that a fair question to put out?
Well, you've got to remember, after the league was won, the performances absolutely dropped. Obviously,
and we were bullish about that. We were bullish about that for a reason. The reason we were bullish about it is because the league was in the bag, and we're obviously going to put our spin on it. However, if there was deeper issues in terms of how that team were playing, performing, coping, attitude, you could say it's not that far removed. It's not that far removed from what we watched the last 6 games last season.
No, it's not. It's not massively different from what we've seen there. And obviously, the players are going through an adjustment spell, as well, with the fact that the manager's changed, and he's going to implement his own style on it, which is going to be different from what Ange Postecoglou had them doing previously. So there is that the players have to try and contend with too. And there might well be a case that some of these players are not going to be able to adapt and play in Rodgers' system in the same way that they were able to, under Ange Postecoglou. And that's where we need to find out. And Rodgers needs to know which ones he can count on that are going to step up for him in the games and be able to play his style of football and the way he wants to go about winning games, and those that aren't going to be able to make the grade. And I think he's got a good idea, because he's already talking, obviously, about quality coming in. The question is really, how much quality does he think he needs after that? Because we know there's going to be, a knee-jerk reaction after a performance like the one we just witnessed at Kilmarnock. And, you could probably go through the whole team pretty much, because there was very few that got pass marks to say, we could do with a new one of them, a new one of them. Even, the likes of Callum McGregor was nowhere near the levels that he's capable of in that match, either. So there's a lot to consider over the next 10 days for Brendan. He's got a lot of food for thought. He knows, he knew when he first came back in that the buck stops with him. He knew, like, if a result like this happened, it's going to be him that the fans are going to be questioning first and foremost. And that's obviously just going to stem from the fact of how he left the last time, that, for a lot of fans, there's a lot of question marks about him coming back in. And when fans have that sort of question mark, then they're going to look for reasons to re-establish that belief. And then it goes back to how things were going the last time Rodgers was in the building towards the end, where the football went a bit stale. So there's a lot.
How much sympathy do you have for Brendan?
I have a little bit, because I think, I feel he could have had a few more players in that were his own by now. I think he was kind of dealing with a few unplanned losses, shall we say. I think the Jota deal came from out of nowhere. He's been unfortunate with Carter Vickers, getting injured again after coming back, because he's colossal for us, Carter Vickers. He's had to go into that game with 2 centre-backs that have, just joined the club, and having to try and form an immediate partnership, albeit I didn't think they were the worst players on the park yesterday. He's had Tatati, whose head looks like it might have been turned. He's not been able to really utilise him as well as we've been able to utilise him, last season. Also, Johnstone being out at right back is a massive blow as well, because for me, Tony Ralston's quite a big downgrade, unfortunately, on Johnstone there too. So he has been dealt a little bit of a bad hand. It goes back to as well what I said, that the cup draw was probably nowhere near as favourable as it could have been. For him, quite often you end up getting a lower league opposition team in this round, and you can get away with making the sort of changes that we had to make. But against Kilmarnock, who look like they are going to be a good side this season, the early indications are they are going to be a good side. Beating Rangers and then also getting a draw at Hearts. They've started the season very well. So I do have sympathy for Brendan in some ways, but I think the bottom line is that the fans aren't going to have any sympathy really for him, the majority of them, because they're going to look at somebody like Brendan Rodgers and they're going to expect him to find ways to win, even if there is countless excuses as to why we might not. And that's just something he'll always have to deal with because of the sort of reputation he had when he came back in the door. And I think Brendan Rodgers knew about that, Russell, when he first came back in. And if he didn't before, he certainly does now, because he'll feel the heat a little bit this week as well.
Well, he will be feeling the heat. I've got to give my tuppence worth on that. I mean, to me, if Rodgers came back and accepted fucking things that I don't think he would, and is going to be a bit of a yes man this time around, then my sympathy level will be very low. And I'll be gutted, because I did have blind faith that this was going to be unbelievable. There's 10 days to fix this window. But Exeter Cup, undeniably, Jonathan, is a problem. It's not what we do. Trebles don't grow on trees either. I accept that. I think we've been conditioned, as you were saying at the top of the show, to almost think trebles are the norm. Thanks to Brendan Rodgers, by the way, who started kicking that off again. But it's not the way it starts season, though, either. It's not the way it starts season. Last time we did that, 2020?
Yeah, we know where that one ended. And it's one of those. It's one of those ones where, you know, it has the makings. There is ingredients there that could end up going south again this time around if things don't go our way over the next 10 days in the transfer window. And then that follows on into performances, particularly that game at Ibrox you're looking to, and everyone's beginning to look towards now, because that's going to be a crucial game even at this early stage in the season, because we're going to find out exactly where the two clubs stand when they go toe to toe with each other. You know, and Rangers are obviously going to have that home field advantage, and they put it to good effect, albeit when the league was over last season. But we're going to find out if Celtic do have the stomach for the fight at Ibrox in a couple of weeks. And if we're basing it off the quality of the squad right now, I think there'd be serious reservations that team, if that team was to go out at Ibrox, you know, tomorrow that played yesterday, I don't think many of us would be feeling overly confident.
You say that, but I watched them on Saturday. They are fucking dog meat, mate, as well. Right? Trust me, they are dog meat. Like, utter shite what I watched. And nothing will change my mind on that. We also call £3 million players project players. £3 million is more than any Rangers player that's been signed, so apart from Danilo. All the rest of them cost less than that, and they've got to make the first team, and they have to have first team impacts. I think that we are holding ourselves to a higher standard because that's what we do. But I think whenever Celtic are doing something we don't like, we then also over-exaggerate what's going on in a positive light at the other side of the city. I watched them on Saturday against Greenock Morton, and they were fucking dreadful. So let's not get too carried away that we won't be able to do anything at Ibrox just yet. 10 days will dictate how that squad looks, how that squad lines up. If anyone say we're going to get destroyed at Ibrox, I've seen some shite in the live chat tonight, I swear to God, about how they're going to batter us and things. And I can't subscribe to that yet. I don't think people are watching Rangers. They're doubling everything up. When Celtic do something wrong, they're exaggerating Rangers' strengths. You know, and it's like, nah, that's not how it'll be. Anyway, let's get to sudden death. I'm sick of talking about us going out of a League Cup. Let's hope the next 10 days gets back in a positive frame of mind. Phil!
Let's hope Phil's question isn't about Celtic League Cup exits.
Oh God, could it be? Good shift tonight, boys. It's been a hard one. But I understand I just have to do PMP. It's not an easy one, but no, good chat tonight, guys. And here I come now to make you even more miserable on a Monday night, because it's that
just
time
Russell
again.
You make miserable these days, Phil.
Yeah, it's time for a bit of sudden death again. We'll try and lighten the mood a wee bit, a wee quiz to end the show, because yes, time for the battle of the brothers Boyce as it continues on, the sibling rivalry captivating the world right now. So yes, here we go. It is 3-1 just now to Jonathan, 4 rounds into this season, and penalty shootout style competition, 5 shots each. I've got a question here, multiple answers, quite simple. Give me a right answer and score, give me a wrong answer and you miss. So I will quickly start setting up all the aesthetics, boys, if you wish to talk the talk to each other, and I will get all that ready just now.
Yes, well, Russell must be feeling the heat a little bit like Brendan Rodgers.
I just don't have it in me.
He's already beginning to feel it. He's wanting to wave the white flag.
I don't have it in me.
He's like the Celtic board. He's looking around for reinforcements. He's going to be subbing himself out for the judge or do a transfer or something like that and put somebody else in his place. I can see it now. He's going to be opening the Boyce bus, coffers and trying to, coerce somebody else into taking his place. I can see it.
You're going to take that, Russell? You're going to take that, mate? Oh, yes.
Okay, take it today.
Okay. Okay, no worries. Being quiet about it. He's going to let his actions do the talking. That's what he's going to do. Right,
if he speaks, he gets into trouble, as Jose Mourinho says.
Oh, yes. If I speak, I'm in trouble.
Little bastard. I'm on the ropes already, let's be honest.
Okay. So here we go again. So, Jonathan, you won last week. Do you wish to go first or do you wish to go second?
I'll go first. I'll let Russell keep his clues. He needs them.
Okay, no worries at all. Yes, because obviously second place is entitled to a clue or a riddle, as it was called last week.
It was terrible last week.
I think this one's a bit better this week. Okay, so
no one is safe from Jonathan this week, Phil. Even you're getting it in the neck.
Savage, absolutely savage. Right, so yes, one of the rules, of course, it changed at the start of the season. This Uncertain Death is it might not necessarily be a Celtic question. Not had one for a while, and it's time for a non-Celtic question.
Oh, God.
Thank God.
So,
I probably should have taken the clue.
And you know what? I do think Russell's got an advantage this one. Not 'cause it's a non-Celtic one, but I think Russell, as a big Championship manager player, this one might suit you.
Oh, come on, Phil. This can't be the question. See, if it's with the Champ Man 0102 database, and he's had a word in your ear.
No. All I'm looking for tonight, guys, is simply name...
Rattled tonight, man. What's going on with me? What's going on? I think the bigger that cliff gets, the bigger your attitude gets you with shite.
Just going all in, just going two-footed on everybody. That's it.
You can't get right down.
Today's question is, I just want you to simply name any city that has hosted the Champions League final since the 1992-93 season, when it became the Champions League. And for clarity, it's the city I want, not the club that plays in the stadium, because there are some clubs who play in the
name of the city or the name of the stadium?
The name of the city.
Just the city name.
Obviously, there are 20 answers in this one.
Fuck.
I will go with the one closest to home and start with Glasgow. Zinedine Zidane.
Oh, yes, Zidane's absolute belter of a volley.
Yes, I'll go Istanbul for the memorable 3-all hingy.
3-all hingy.
The 3-all hingy, that's right. Everyone knows the 3-all hingy. He's right. Istanbul's the correct answer.
Everyone knows the 3-all hingy.
Everyone knows the 3-all hingy. Everyone knows it.
I shall go with one of your favourite managers of all time, Pep Guardiola, getting it in London.
He did, yeah. London's held it multiple times.
I don't have a clue. I'm going to say Madrid.
Madrid's the correct answer, yes.
Yeah.
Definitely one of these questions where I think a logical guess is very likely to be right.
Yeah.
I am going to say I think Pep did it again here, Rome.
You Pep fanboy, yeah. Rome is indeed correct. Aye.
Yeah,
wow.
Pep fanboy.
I know.
Lisbon?
Yeah, Lisbon's the correct answer. Yeah, it's held it multiple times in the last the Champions League era and the 2010s had a couple of them. So, yeah.
Milan?
Yeah, Milan's the correct answer as well. Yep, bang on.
Paris?
Yeah, Paris is correct as well.
That was recently.
Yep. Aye. Saint Denis, which is an area of Paris. The Stade de France is in there, so that's Paris. Yes, correct.
I think Old Trafford also hosts the one, so I'm saying Manchester.
You're correct. Manchester 2003 final. Dreadful final between Juventus and AC Milan. Dire. Entitled to a clue, Russell.
Yeah, what's the score?
It's 5-4. You need this to force...
Let's take the clue then.
Okay, the clue for this one is a stadium for the new millennium.
Cardiff!
Yes, the Millennium Stadium in Cardiff. Yes.
I didn't actually have Cardiff written down, so that was quite good.
2017, Real Madrid and Juventus.
Yes. I am going to say Munich.
Yeah, Munich is a correct answer as well. Yes.
That's shit. The minds went a bit blank.
That's a shame. Mine hasn't.
Oh, you've got Hannah's, have you? Oh, shit, I'm fucked. Moscow.
Yes,
Moscow, that's
indeed.
good.
John
2008,
Terry's
very
slip.
good.
Yes, Moscow.
I'm going to go where Manchester United won their treble. Russell, remember that was Barcelona.
Barcelona's indeed correct. There's that Pep connection again. Yeah. Just following Pep's career.
I know.
We're getting down to the nitty-gritty now. There are 1, 2, 3, 7 left in the pot, and they are some of the trickier ones. I'm not going to lie.
Are they?
Yeah. Still, the logical guesses, I would still recommend. Just
Amsterdam.
that is a good logical guess. It is a correct logical guess. Well done. Amsterdam keeps you in it, Russell. Down to 6 to go.
Yeah, and that's me, I think, now. Having to have a wee think here.
Yes.
I don't know of any absolute certainties left, but I've got a few.
I'm hanging in for dear life.
I've got a few cities written down. Which one to go for? Gonna say Kiev.
You're correct. Kiev. 2018 final. Gareth Bale's overhead kick.
Oh shit! That is what I had next.
Left.
Kiev. Oh, very good, Jonathan. You deserve it this time. I'll never say that again, but you do this time. I don't know. Athens.
Athens
that's
is correct.
right.
Athens is correct. You're still in it, Russell. There are 4 left. And you've got 2 shots each. Can you actually get all 20 of them? Can you do it?
That would be quite impressive. I don't think so.
Given what's left on the board, it would be extremely impressive.
I'm going to have to guess another one and say Berlin.
Berlin's correct as well. My God. What? Yes, Berlin correct. There are 3 left.
We're obviously really good at remembering Champions League finals. So we should have done a Champions League final podcast. We wasted doing Celtic.
Yeah, sure, true. This isn't right. Copenhagen.
Surely not.
It's wrong. It's wrong, unfortunately, Russell. It was a
I'd
noble
ran out,
guess.
so-
Again, logical guesses. Capital
ran
cities is
out.
always a good way to look at it.
Warsaw and Budapest left. Were either of them
Both of them were wrong. Both of them were wrong. The
both
3
of
that
them
were
were wrong.
left, there's one
Go on.
capital city left, which is Vienna, Austria. And the other 2, one of them is Porto. Porto held the Champions League final in the COVID year.
Okay.
And the other one, which you would have done so well to get, and I don't know if I've seen it came up in the chat, is where Schalke play Gelsenkirchen.
Oh, we never got that.
Schalke, when Jose Mourinho won the trophy, beating Monaco in the final, it was held in Gelsenkirchen, Germany, which is where Schalke play.
Gelsenkirchen.
Yeah, that's it. So I've a hell of an effort between the 2 of you to get as many as you did.
I'm not as downbeat. Like I know I got quite a few there, so I'm not. I will give him the one time ever the praise that he deserves.
That was very,
Very
well
close
done,
there to
boys,
doing them
between
all.
us.
Very close. I don't think we've ever done them all. Wouldn't that have just been typical if it didn't on Celtic when we got them all on?
Would have been, but no, there we go. Another edition of Sudden Death is in the books. It's currently 4-1 to
4-1.
Johnstone, but still a long time to go. Sometime in December, I think the finish line will be for this season. So plenty of time on the board. Plenty.
Yes.
Russell's fans will be getting the Sharks out soon, I think. Season's not going well.
Oh, man.
Well, thanks to everyone for being in the comments. It's been a lively one, as always. When Celtic get beat and exit a tournament, it's always going to be difficult. I love saying trust the process, keep the faith and all that. That's always been what I'm like. Not quite. Next 10 days, we will find out how serious Celtic mean of getting Brendan in and getting Celtic back to business. Let's get to work, Celtic, would be my message, because it doesn't feel as though we've quite got to work yet. Good night.